welcome to the first episode of 2025 of the Piano Ninja Tricks podcast. Hi, I'm Lisa Spector, your piano ninja, here to make everything easier for you at the piano. And I'd like to introduce you to my new dog, Sundance, who's over here in the corner. And I've had her about 2 weeks. She is a 17-month-old career change dog from Guide Dogs for the Blind. You would not know it now, but she is a very high drive, very active dog that is keeping me very busy and very getting very fit with her, and she's a blast. And I'm a former puppy raiser from Guide Dogs, and my last two, Gina and Sanchez, also came from Guide Dogs. And it's just so fun to watch her learn that as soon as I'm at the piano, it means go to your bed and be quiet and chill out and settle. So she's doing a great job at that. I am going to be talking more than I'm going to be demonstrating today in the podcast, because there's a lot to talk about as we enter this new year. So many times we're thinking about a reflection over what happened last year in 2024 and what our intentions are for 2025. I had a fabulous goal setting workshop or discussion really with my Piano Ninja Tricksters Club members, and we were talking about goals. And there's two kinds of goals. There's your goals of what you want to accomplish, and then your habit goals to create those accomplishments. So first of all, before we get to that, just know that this is not my information. This is commonly known that a goal to be successful wants to be achievable. I'll talk about that in a second. Measurable and specific. So achievable would be if you're at the level that you're learning Bach inventions, and that's your highest level, and you want to learn the Beethoven Waldstein Sonata, that is probably not achievable this year. That is not achievable within some period of time, but that would be a lot in 1 year. Specific would be non-specific would be I want to practice more, which is not a good goal anyhow, but I'm just using that as an example. Specific would be I want to practice an hour 5 days a week. And measurable would be along the lines of, instead of saying I want to work on hand exercises, have it measurable of how often do you want to work on those and how many do you want to learn and so forth. So that's kind of more commonly known. But what you also want to pay attention to is the only way that goals are achievable is if you create the habits to achieve them. I'm here to help you create good, healthy, productive, smart practice habits so that your goal I don't want your goal to be to practice more. I want your goal to be practice less and accomplish more. That's everything about the Piano Ninja Tricks is everything I stand for. I know it's not common, but if you're here, then hopefully you agree with that or are open to learning how to do that. So I am going to spend a few minutes answering some questions that were submitted. So if you are listening on actually, before I get to this, sorry, I'm a little out of order. I want to talk about something I created for you over the holiday break that I'm so excited about. It's a free checklist requested by the members of my Piano Ninja Tricksters Club. It's a free checklist to help you create very easy fingering. One of the challenges that pianists have over and over again without sometimes knowing it is choosing fingering that's not efficient, or worse yet, not choosing fingering but just leaving it to chance. You never want to do that. You want to write down your fingering in your score right from the start. So I've created a checklist that goes over how do you choose efficient fingering that helps you move minimally. I have to say, of the comments I get, of the compliments I get about my playing, probably the number one compliment is, Lisa, how do you make it look so easy? That is not by chance. It is by design. One of the ways I make it look so easy and feel so easy and is so easy is by choosing efficient fingering. If you've watched my hands, you know I move minimally. And I do that by choosing efficient fingering. When you're not choosing efficient fingering, it's a little bit like trying to run a marathon in boots. You can do it. You might finish, but you're going to have a lot of blisters and you're going to run slower than the person with really fitted, great, I'm from the East Coast, call them sneakers, so athletic shoes. So it can happen, but it's not efficient, it's slower, and it's work, and it hurts. I would imagine. I'm not a marathon runner, never was. But I imagine it hurts your feet. And the same thing with inefficient fingering. It can actually hurt your hands. So it is one of the number one things that I see over and over of pianists choosing non-efficient fingering. And one of the ways I can tell instantly by looking at them, their fingers, is the less you want less movement. The less you have to move, the faster you can move. And in my checklist, I talk about grabbing notes in one fingering passage and looking for patterns and all the things. So you can grab the checklist. It's a really short checklist, but really helps you. It's a little bit of the Cliff Notes, but it really helps you get started with choosing efficient fingering. It is at lisaspector.com/fingering checklist. And okay, so now to go into questions. If you're listening on a podcast app, you go into the show notes, the first thing you'll say is, send me a message. It actually will send me a text message. Ask me your questions there. If you're watching on YouTube, post a comment. I answer all my comments. And if you have a question about your particular piece of music or fingering question or something like that, ask me. So these questions are actually from a member of Farnaz in the Piano Ninja Tricksters Club, and they're all very different, but they all will apply to you as a pianist. Number one, do we need to spend some time every day studying music scores? How do you do that? So I do like to study music scores. I don't do it every day. It won't hurt to do it every day, and if you have the time, by all means do it. But it doesn't have to be every day. But how do you do it so that it's productive? So it takes, like anything else, let's say I'm going to compare it to sight reading. Good sight readers, great sight readers are not born, they are created. Great sight readers practice sight reading. They don't just practice the piano, they practice their sight reading skills. The same is true with studying your score. So don't expect that the first time you open your score and you're going to look at it and know what to do. It's going to take some practice. So always, everything comes down to this. How can I make this easier? If you're listening on the podcast app, I'm holding up a sign that says, how can I make this easier? I'd make it a sticky note on your piano. So how can you make studying your score easier? Start with a small section. Start with one phrase. Start with one line. Start with the most famous melody of that piece and see if you can hear it. So see if you can hear just the melody. See if you can sing along with it. Experiment singing along with it. Can you hear the bass with it? Can you hear the bass alone? I don't expect that that's going to happen right away, but if you've done enough practicing of left hand alone, you want to experiment with what does that sound like alone, and then look at the score and determine that. If that's too hard for you, if you're not quite ready for that, listen to a recording while you're studying the score, and then gradually, little by little, of little section at a time, remove the score. I'll never forget the time I was at a competition in Texas, I think, and Susan Starr's fabulous pianist was one of the judges. And there are 3 judges, and 2 of them said to her, do you want to go to dinner? And she said, love to, but I can't. I have to practice. And they're like, you got a piano delivered in your hotel room? How come we didn't get that? And she said, no, I don't have a piano in my hotel room. I have my music scores in my hotel room. So she was studying her music scores to practice. It is a really, really good skill to have. It takes time. Do it little by little. So that's number one question. Number two question she has is, when accompanying another instrument, I find that if I lose my place, it is very hard to get back to it. What is the best way to practice jumping back in? So I still always come back to this question. How can I make this easier? So what you want to do is practice that on your own when you're not with accompanying another instrumentalist. So what you do that, if you're used to losing your place, practice actually losing your place and jumping back in. I always say that when you're playing piano alone or with another musician or in an ensemble, it is very much like being in an orchestra. If you are playing a clarinet in an orchestra and you miss a note, you can't go back and correct that note because you're not going to then be with all the other instrumentalists in your orchestra. It is very much the same thing, but you can practice that. So you want times when you're practicing, and it is you're always intentional about your practicing. So you're deciding this time, no matter what, in these 4 bars, I'm going to go on, even if I stop, even if I make a mistake, quote unquote, is whatever you call the mistake. If I miss a note, I'm going to go on. And it may be hard at first, but the more you do it, it gets easier and easier. And then you expand to 8 bars, and then you expand to 2 lines, and then you expand to the whole page. So little by little, you're doing more of that. Other times you're saying, I'm going to go back and correct because I don't want to just brush this under the carpet. It'll never get better. So we're kind of like alchemists as pianists. Sometimes we're changing a lot, so it depends on where you are in that stage of the piece. Sometimes we are just practicing moving forward. Other times we're practicing those sections, and I think that will help. Number 3 and last question is, when learning a new piece, is it better to work on dynamics right at the start? If that is right, how does that work with focusing on one thing at a time? Really, really good question, because this is one of these gray areas where it may sound like I am counter to, what's the word I want? I am going against the grain of what I have taught you. So I always say do one thing at a time. However, when you're learning music, you want to see as much and hear as much right at the start as possible. So what I mean by that is, when you're learning a piece of music, you do want to pay attention to dynamics, phrasing, and so forth. By doing one thing at a time, definitely with the piano ninja tricks. If you're working on cyclical rhythm, you're working on quick reflex motion, learn one of those at a time. But I would say with dynamics, you do want to pay attention. Here's the reason why. Because if a section has a crescendo and you haven't learned it and you've practiced it for a week or 2 or even a day, honestly, it's in your ear and it gets in your body that's the way to do it. Now, when you go to add the crescendo, you have to undo what you've learned, which is just generally everyone's dynamics without thinking about it is like mezzo forte. So you have to undo that mezzo forte to go from a piano to a crescendo to a forte. You don't ever want to spend time undoing. That's what slows you down. What speeds up your progress is removing all the things you have to undo. So as much as possible at the beginning, you want to see and listen for all the dynamics and phrasing and other things in the music. So that is a little bit of an exception to the rule of doing one thing at a time. But when I talk about one thing at a time, it's always under the guideline of, it's never about creating a situation where you have to undo a practice habit that you've unintentionally, or maybe in this case, intentionally created. So I add dynamics right away as much as possible. So I hope that helps with your questions, Farnaz, and I think those questions and hopefully answers will help everyone here. So in the new year, we have, we're all thinking new year, new goals and so forth. And so my motto is new year, new piano ninja habits. So coming up in early February, I am going to have a master class on, lost my notes on this. Hold on one second. I'm going to have a master class called Piano Ninja Practice Habits for Major Progress. I'll have a sign up for that for you next week. It's going to be the first weekend in February, and look forward to helping you create your piano habits. And in the meantime, other things going on, make sure you sign up for the Piano Ninja Fingering Checklist that I mentioned at the beginning, lisaspector.com/fingering checklist. And it is my birthday this week, January 5th. So I am working on creating a gift for you. And when you sign up for the checklist, you'll be the first to know about the gifts. When it happens, it's all going to be on one day only, January 5th. It's a Sunday. And look forward to gifting you with music on my birthday. So with that, I am going to sign off with my closing piece, which is the Godofsky arrangement of the Chopin Aeolian Harp Etude, but for left hand only. And I will see you next week.